to iCritic Live. This is the podcast where we talk about entertainment, pop culture, and life in between. I'm your host, Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net. Thank you so much for spending a few minutes of your time here with me today. And here's the thing, K-Pop Demon Hunters, #1 movie at the box office this weekend, unofficially. We'll talk about that a little later. But yeah, so folks, I have to make a little bit of a confession. I had not seen K-Pop Demon Hunters. I knew it was this big thing on Netflix. I knew people were listening to the soundtracks. Here's the thing with me. I have nothing against watching movies on streaming, but I tend to get around to them a lot slower. I'd much rather stream TV shows and things like that. And then when I found out that there was going to be a sing-along event in theaters, I decided, you know what? Screw it. I know that the experience might be quote-unquote marred by singing fangirls and things like that, but I would much rather see this in theaters my first time rather than on streaming. Now, I went to the RPX in Newport Beach. That's one of the biggest RPXs I can think of. It's a Regal Premium large format, and it was fairly full, not completely, but fairly full at 7 p.m. I think I had a shy audience. Basically, nobody sang along, which for me, that was pretty nice. But hey, I got to watch it in relative peace. Everyone laughed and clapped and stuff at the appropriate times. And I have to be honest, I really enjoyed the movie. I'm going to give it 4 stars in my written review, which you can read on my website and on Letterboxd if you follow me there. But that all being said, of course, the discourse turned into how successful could this have been at the box office had it been given a proper theatrical run. Because for those of you who are not aware of how this movie was made, this was being made during the COVID lockdowns, and the future of movie theaters was uncertain. And Sony decided to sell several animated films to Netflix, movies like The Mitchells versus the Machines. I believe Vivo was one of them, the Lin-Manuel Miranda movie. And K-Pop Demon Hunters was apparently one of the last ones they did. They spent almost $100 million on it. Sony was not entirely sure if it was going to be a huge box office hit, so they sold it to Netflix. Netflix paid for the cost, and then I think roughly $20 million on top of that. So Sony made money on this, but now that it's become a huge worldwide phenomenon, the soundtrack is tearing up the streaming charts. And by the way, the music was really good. I totally understand why the soundtrack was so beloved. And it's going to be Netflix's most watched movie. Now, that doesn't mean Netflix themselves make money on that, but Netflix looked at this whole thing and said, you know what? Why don't we do a 2-night sing-along event? And it was doing so well that theaters actually asked for an extension. That didn't happen. In fact, as you listen to this now, the sing-along version you can stream on Netflix, which I don't know why they bothered, because why would you want to sing along alone in your own house? But here's the thing. If Netflix was reporting box office numbers, which they aren't, but there's ways of finding this stuff out, Netflix would have had their first #1 hit at the box office. And a few questions have arisen well, how much money did Sony leave on the table, and will this change Netflix's attitude? And the answer is, it's probably not as straightforward as you think. So here's one article from Variety. Box office. Netflix K-Pop Demon Hunters leads was estimated 18 million debut. Weapons stay strong with 15.6 million. And by the way, Weapons is also really good if you're old enough to watch it. By the way, I read Scott Mendelson's blog this morning, and apparently those numbers have risen to 19.5 million. So, not bad for, what was essentially a movie that had been streamed 50 times at home. Maybe the movie theaters are not as outdated as you'd like to claim. Ted? But let's look at this article real quick. This article is written by Rebecca Rubin. In a box office twist, a film from the Theatrical versus Netflix appears to be #1 on North American charts. K-Pop Demon Hunters, a sing-along version of the hit animated musical, is estimated to have earned $18 million to $20 million on Saturday and Sunday. Netflix isn't reporting grosses, but projections from rival studios and exhibitors would put ticket sales for KPop Demon Hunters ahead of those for Weapons, which was expected to claim first place and looks to earn a strong $15.6 million from 3,631 North American theaters in its third weekend of release. By the way, KPop Demon Hunters was about 17 million, so if AMC had shown it, it might have made $5 million more, who knows? K-Pop Demon Hunters is playing on 1,700 screens. That's more than double the theater count for the streamers Glass Onion and Knives Out Mystery in 2022, with roughly 1,150 sold-out showings according to knowledgeable sources. That is not bad at all. That K-Pop Demon Hunters is a fantasy adventure about a K-pop girl group protecting the world from demons with their music is available on the big screen at all is rare, and not just because it's backed by Netflix, which doesn't prioritize theatrical. Sony Pictures Animation produced a film directed by Maggie Kang and Chris Applehans. It is also unusual because K-Pop Demon Hunters isn't new. The movie debuted on Netflix about 2 months ago, but in the time since, it has become the second most watched film ever on the platform, while 3 of the film's original tunes, Golden, Your Idol, and Soda Pop, are currently in the top 10 of Billboard's Hot 100 chart. Though it's a boon for theaters during a painfully slow weekend, that's not why Netflix bought K-Pop Demon Hunters to multiplexes. The streaming behemoth is hoping that excitement will drive fans back to the platform for rewatches or the inevitable sequel. AMC Theaters, the world's largest circuit, is the only major chain that isn't playing K-Pop Demon Hunters. So, yeah, and then they go on a little bit more. So here's the thing. Let's ask the first question. Would this movie have made a lot more money had it come out in theaters first as opposed to Netflix? And the answer to that is, I personally don't know. Because here's the thing. Unlike a lot of people who are on X and Facebook and Threads and things like that, I actually am surprised by the success of this movie. I think everyone technically is, but when everyone's like, oh my gosh, look at how much people are watching it. Like, this could have done bonkers in the theatrical experience. And the thing is, you have to kind of keep in mind, this movie was in production during COVID. People did not know what was going to be in theaters or if there would even be a movie theater to go back to when this movie is finished. It costs about $100 million. And by the way, when you watch the movie, you can see the money on the screen. It makes a lot of sense that that was not a cheap movie. Now, Sony had 2 options. They could distribute it themselves, pour another $50 to $100 million into the marketing. I think they probably would have poured 50 if I'm being honest. And they would have hoped that people would have come out. Now, here's the thing. This $18 to $20 million debut is very impressive for a movie that has been on streaming for months now. And even though I saw it for the first time, I can guarantee you I was the only one in that theater who had seen it for the first time. Everyone else clearly had seen it before, as, you know, I could tell by certain ways they reacted to certain scenes, like they were just waiting for that scene to come up. I personally believe that if K-Pop Demon Hunters had opened in theaters without a Netflix run, I think it would have opened to about this, which would have actually been considered a huge disappointment. It would have been considered a box office bomb. Now, I think eventually word of mouth could have pulled it up. Sony is not as trigger happy about pulling movies from theaters if the opening weekend does not do very well. Sony tends to kind of keep it in there. But what if this movie had opened to, let's even be generous and say $25 million without a Netflix run? It opened in theaters, opened $25 million. That would have been considered not a very good start. Theaters might have started pulling screenings of the movie. Like, they probably would have started dropping screens, maybe some showtimes. I think it would have held around, but would Sony have really recouped their money? I think they might have eventually broken even. But keep in mind, if they'd put this out in theaters and market it and things like that, they'd have to make $300 to $400 million, I think, to break even or make real money. And that was just a tall ask for something like this that was sight unseen. No one had heard of it, and everything like that. The reason so many people watched it on Netflix is because essentially they consider it to be free. I know it's not free. You're paying $27 a month for Netflix, yada, yada, yada. But here's the thing. Once you pay your monthly subscription, you can watch anything you want. Like this weekend, I was watching new episodes or new dubbed episodes of Detective Conan. Very good show, by the way. If you haven't seen Detective Conan, they've got curated dubbed episodes on Netflix now. Highly recommend you watch it. I was also watching the documentary on The Biggest Loser, and that documentary on Jussie Smollett, which I'm probably going to be making a podcast episode on that because, oh my gosh, that was nonsense. But you see, I'm just watching things because it's like, no money's coming out of pocket, and you stream enough stuff and it ends up being pennies on the dollar at some point. So of course people are going to watch it, be surprised how much they enjoyed, then they're going to watch it again. And again, they're going to invite their friends over and they're going to tell their friends. But keep in mind, no money is coming out of pocket during any of these streams. Now, how does Netflix make money on this? Well, that's a good question, and I think technically Sony is still making more money than Netflix is. Just throwing that out there. But I think that while it might have made enough to break even, ultimately there would be no serious profits from this franchise unless Sony found a way to merchandise the heck out of it really quick until the sequel would come out. Now, Sony should have, preserved their interest. Unfortunately, they made a big mistake. Netflix now controls the rights to this thing. Granted, I don't think they can make anything without Sony's involvement, so Sony is still going to make money on this, but ultimately Netflix holds all the cards, and Sony should have just sold them the first film, kept the rights to it, and then Sony would have been in cotton, because at that point Sony would say, hey, we got a sequel coming out, and yes, it's coming to theaters, and then that movie probably would have made 50 to 100 million on the opening weekend. But this whole notion that, imagine how much more money you would have made had it had a longer theatrical run. Yeah, they probably would have, but if they didn't partner with Netflix, there's a real chance they might have lost money on this thing, because that's just how crazy the box office is. So I still think long term Sony probably made a huge mistake by doing this. They should not, at the very least, they should not have sold the whole franchise to Netflix. They should have kept, that part where they're saying, hey, going forward, any sequels that are made, we have the right to put them in theaters. We own them, but you will get an exclusive streaming window for several years if you co-finance the sequels. Like, give them the option to co-finance, or you keep, there probably could have been something they could have, how should I put it? What's the word I'm looking for? This is where my stutter, negotiated. Yeah. Because here's the thing, folks, and I tell people this because I've been reading a lot of comments like Sony should get some of this success. They made the movie. It's like, guys, it's not about what you deserve. It's about what you negotiate. It ain't called show friends. It's show business. So, yeah, Sony, this is what they negotiated. This is what they're going to get. There you go. But now there's a second question that has come up with this whole thing. Like, is Netflix going to now embrace theatrical more? And I'm thinking no, and Variety agrees with me. Here is a article called Netflix Broke Its Rules to Share K-Pop Demon Hunters on the Big Screen, but don't expect the streamer to make a habit of it. And this is by Peter DeBruge, I believe is what's said. And this is what it says. Now here's a first. 2 months after dropping K-Pop Demon Hunters on Netflix, the streamer is putting the animated hit in theaters. And not just the cursory Oscar qualifying run its prestige titles gets in New York and Los Angeles. This one is going wide in more than 1,700 venues for karaoke caption screenings in which audience participation is encouraged. Dress up, sing along, give into the catchy choreography. That's how it's done. I'm raising my hand. I know you can't see it because this is a podcast, but whatever. I've been on the Hunters train since the beginning and bought tickets to the first screening of the day at Los Angeles Alamo Drafthouse Theater, where the house was packed with family audiences. They weren't just in it for the songs either, but gleefully recited most of the dialogue too. These kids knew the movie by heart, having watched it countless times at home, and now their parents were spending close to $100 to experience it on the big screen. Next week, the one-of-a-kind cultural phenomenon in which a trio of Korean pop stars use the positive energy their songs generate to keep soul-sucking ghouls at bay until evil demons from a rival boy band steal their fans. Side note for me, folks, this really is more entertaining than it sounds. Is set to become Netflix's most watched movie. Clearly, this exclusive 2-day event was willed into existence by popular demand, just as any extension or encore Netflix agrees to would also be. To the best of my knowledge, nobody was begging Netflix to release a sing-along version of Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio 3 years ago, much less Emilia Perez, back when Netflix was treating that film like an Oscar frontrunner. By the way, side note, I saw both of those in theaters. The Pinocchio I actually saw at a Regal that was not an art house theater, so that one got a little bit more wider release than mostly. And even though purists wanted to see Alfonso Cuarón's Roma and Martin Scorsese's The Irishman in theaters, those movies didn't sell out nearly as quickly as K-Pop Demon Hunter shows did when Netflix announced its plan last week. I also saw those movies in theaters, and by the way, if you didn't see those movies in theaters, that's a shame. Although I don't blame you for that, I blame Netflix, obviously. Continuing. The film is all about fandom, and this unprecedented move from the streaming-first media company suggests that Netflix recognized that the film's million-strong audience were craving the collective experience that only cinemas can provide. Maybe theaters aren't quite as obsolete as Ted Sarandos would have us believe. Hey, that's what I said earlier. Nor is this singular event likely to change how Netflix does business. I agree. Let's see what he says, and then I'll comment. First, it's important to understand what K-Pop Demon Hunters is. Produced by Sony Pictures Animation, the studio behind Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and The Mitchells vs. Machines, the cleverly executed computer-animated feature looks every bit as slick as the latest releases from Pixar and DreamWorks, which is to say it could have easily supported a big screen release in the first place. But that would have meant spending millions of marketing dollars just to let audiences know of the movie's existence. In a marketplace where opening weekend makes all the difference and films get chased off screen before they've had time to build a following. That's one reason Sony started selling its animated features to Netflix, which came to the rescue of Wish from K-pop co-director Chris Applehands amid the pandemic. Netflix famously keeps streaming numbers to itself, but it's safe to say that K-Pop Demon Hunters would not have been nearly the same phenomenon had it gone to the traditional theatrical route. And I'm going to pause here for a second because you know what? When I think I made a video last year or several months ago at least where Ted Sarandos said that Barbenheimer would have been just as big had it been on Netflix. I believe that is crap. I believe that is not true whatsoever. But I'm going to say in this particular case, K-Pop Demon Hunters was a massive hit because of streaming. It was probably a little too weird to bust out of the gate as a big thing. I think it would have caught on with word of mouth, but if theaters start shedding screens before then it's kind of a moot point. And by the way, this article is going to highlight just how much this is probably true. Continue the article. This way, the movie benefited from word of mouth, aggregating more viewers as early adapters told their friends to check it out. That's a luxury streaming releases have. Remember, and he writes, remember was 3 R's, RRR, the Gonzo Tollywood movie that barely made a ripple in theaters but gained a following on Netflix? The best analogy here could be Disney's animated Encanto, which did okay business in theaters. This was 2021 when windows were still compressed in response to the pandemic, but really took off when it hit Disney Plus 30 days later. Well, he didn't add later. I put that in. On a side note, I think Encanto could have been a massive box office success, but everyone knew it was going to be in Disney Plus in less than a month. So most people decided to wait. Me and my wife did not. We went to see it in 3D. We loved it, but basically we were the only ones of our circle that saw it in theaters. Everyone else said, yeah, we'll just wait for Disney Plus. It's going to be there in a couple of weeks anyway. I'll save $70 or something. And movie studios wonder why streaming killed the theaters. Only then did the song We Don't Talk About Bruno blow up with a very similar demographic. Perhaps the late shows will draw a crowd for older fans, though I love sitting through the movie with a room full of chatty kids, one of whom was named Zoe, like the eager-to-please hunter rapper, who fights demons with a glowing 3 prolonged dagger. Zoe and her friends seemed tickled anytime her name was spoken. Back in June, before the film was released, I asked my friendly neighborhood Netflix reps if there was any way to see K-pop Demon Hunters on the big screen. They declined. I'd also hoped it might screen at the Annecy Animation Festival, which unspooled the week prior in France, but for some reason, they brought Fixed instead. I'm sorry. Fix is awful. I wrote a video review on my main channel. Watch it, or you can read it on my website. I can't be alone in preferring to watch movies in the theater, although Netflix does their best to make that difficult for audiences. In Los Angeles, that meant opening them at the Bay, the upscale Pacific Palisades Theater that shuttered amid the wildfires earlier this year. Okay, a side note, does anyone know if the Bay is going to be reopening? Did the Bay burn down? I am very, very curious, but I don't want to drive over an hour just to check. I went to the Bay Theater all the time, and that was just the way it was. So, anyway, let's continue. Quite the slap to watch Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, clearly better on the big screen, or the latest Adam Sandler movie. Now they sprinkle them into art houses around town, doing what feels like the bare minimum to meet contractual obligations and Academy Award rules. With K-pop Demon Hunters, they opened in at least 24 Los Angeles theaters, including major chains like Regal and Cinemark, more than doubling the number of screens the studio offered Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery, in 2022. But the data-driven company also knew what they had in this case, what every studio wants. A sure thing. At the moment, 3 of the film's original songs sit among the Billboards. Okay, so let's skip that one. Netflix has a full slate of big screen-worthy movies coming this fall, including Sundance Marvel Train Dreams, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and Catherine Bigelow's A House of Dynamite. But however many millions K-pop Demon Hunter earns this weekend, that doesn't mean the streamer will rush to open those films wide. To repeat this experiment, they'd need another proven success with a built-in audience willing to pay to rewatch a film they first saw on streaming. Netflix has the numbers to indicate what time of year certain movies are popular. Maybe a Christmas release of last year's Carry On could work. Or maybe this is a unicorn event for which we should simply be grateful. For 2 days only, non-subscribers can see K-pop Demon Hunter surrounded by singing groupies whose enthusiasm will willed the streaming phenomenon onto the big screen. And that's ultimately where I kind of believe that this is heading. I don't believe Netflix is going to do this more. I mean, they do like money, but they prefer the money to be funneled into the app. You'll notice that with this thing, rather than say, hey, we're making a lot of money in theaters, let's put it out for longer and just see how much we can get. They announce like, hey, this sing-along thing that you like so much, it's coming to Netflix on midnight the next day, even though it's not the same thing at all. Now, apparently they will be releasing Frankenstein into a handful of theaters. Hopefully it will be at least 600. I plan to see Frankenstein in theaters. And if the Bay reopens, I will continue seeing Netflix movies in theaters because they are better in theaters. They really are. So if Netflix still frustrates me, and of course, maybe the Narnia movie will have that exclusive IMAX run, we'll see. But the thing is, Netflix is not willing to play by the rules of theater. And by the way, if you want to know why AMC did not have this movie, it's because Netflix is doing this and they're still asking to bend the rules. They don't want to report the box office numbers. They don't want to put a robust marketing campaign behind any of this. And this is where Netflix needs to change. They need to start making little changes if they're going to actually compete in the theatrical market. They need to respect a 45-day window. They need to have robust marketing in their budgets. They need to report box office numbers. Some people forget this, but Netflix actually made a deal with Cinemark to put movies into theaters, Netflix movies, and that's where I would see movies like Tick, Tick, Boom and Don't Look Up and that Zack Snyder Army of the Dead movie. I think the last Netflix movie I saw in a Cinemark was Matilda the Musical. And here's the thing, except for Tick, Tick, Boom and I'm gonna say Don't Look Up, which was weird, almost all these movies had nobody in them. And that's because Netflix didn't bother to tell people they were in theaters. They would always push when they're coming to Netflix, but not when they're in theaters. That is why AMC was not going to do this. And by the way, their upcoming Narnia release that's exclusive to IMAX for a couple weeks, they're primarily doing that just to hurt the movie studios who have been playing by the game, who need those IMAX screens for the holiday season. And they're only going to keep it in there for a couple weeks, not only to keep those movies out of the IMAX, but to kind of highlight, hey, come Christmas, sign up for Netflix because the Narnia movie will be on Netflix. Netflix is not changing because of this. Although I do agree that had they expanded this particular movie, they could have done very, very well. At the end of the day, if you want to see Netflix movies in theaters, keep an eye out for them when they show up in your area and buy tickets to them. But the thing is, Netflix is very, very much anti-theaters. They even brush off any shareholders' concerns. And by the way, as my friend Rachel pointed out, one of the reasons Netflix is not reporting the box office numbers is because they don't want to point out how stupid their philosophy is. Because if they actually bragged about how much money they made, their shareholders would start going like, hey, maybe we should try putting things in theaters a little bit more. And Netflix doesn't want that. They want people to go to their app, even though it is absolutely ridiculous to think that people still wouldn't. I mean, Apple, who hopefully will change their tune, learned a very big lesson after a few flops that, hey, you just need one hit to make this worth it. F1 became a $500 million success story, and guess what? It's still going to be going to Apple TV Plus. So Apple made $500 million, and they're still getting a movie for their streaming service. So I think Apple will probably start expanding some of their movies in theaters more. And in fact, I'm going to be seeing Highest to Lowest in theaters tomorrow because that movie's kind of been sticking around a little bit. So I'm going to go see that in theaters, the new Spike Lee movie with Denzel Washington. But anyway, folks, this is probably where we're going to end it right now. It's really nice that KPop Demon Hunters is having a moment. I don't know if it would have made a whole lot more money had it come out in theaters first, and I don't think this is going to change Netflix's mind. Now, what I do agree with is that the sequel would be a blow-up success in theaters, and hopefully that idea would be enough to convince the Netflix shareholders to like say, hey, you really got to put this in like theaters. But we'll have to see because Netflix is Netflix. They don't like playing by anyone's rules but their own. But I would like to ask, did you see this sing-along presentation? What was it like for you? Had you seen it before you saw the sing-along? Like, did you watch on Netflix first? And, hey, Oscar chances. Do you think it's going to win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film? Personally, I say no, but we'll have to wait and see. But if you are listening to this podcast on a place where there are comments that can be left, please leave a comment. I'd like to know your answer to any of these things. And if this is your first time here and you like what you hear, hey, let's make it official and become, subscribe to the podcast. We're on Spotify, Deezer, Apple, all the podcasting platforms of choice. And as always, folks, I'll see you at the movies. Take care, everyone.
Hey, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Just a few more things. First of all, the names that you see on the screen, these are our Patreon and YouTube member supporters. And I thank each and every one of them. Their support helps me make exclusive videos for Patreon and YouTube members, as well as keep the channel running. And of course, is just of huge kindness to me. Also, don't forget to check out the iCritic-led podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, whatever podcasting service you listen to. It is there. We definitely want to see you there. And hey, there's also other videos that you can check out. So, check out these other channels, these other videos, especially that one. I think that's a really good one.